Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin can and string is our analyst and co-host. You know him from many websites, including Zone Coverage and several podcasts around the internet. He is useful human Arif Hassan. Arif, how are you this Sunday afternoon?
Doing great. Vikings won. Packers lost, I guess. That's good, too.
that is a big positive.
Right, yeah. Vikings currently still second in the NFC and leading the division. Very happy.
We like both of these things. It was a game. It certainly happened. The Vikings came out ahead, also a positive. We got a lot of things to talk about as far as the game is concerned, a lot of things to unpack, a lot of things to gripe about, both about the game and otherwise. So welcome to the episode. We're taping this a little early because, in case you haven't paid attention to the last couple shows, Arif and Dusty are going to London this week.
Yeah, gotta pack up and everything. I'll be packing through the night so that I will hopefully have something to wear when I'm in London.
Will the Captain America shirt make it to London?
Probably not, because my girlfriend is going to fly over halfway through, and I think she'd be livid if I made an ass of myself in England.
She's not going to be there the whole time. I feel
She's
like
gonna
you're
help
cheating.
Me repack on the way home. She'll find the shirt.
Then you sign it. You sign it and give it away, or like auction it off at the get together on the Sunday night. It'll be fine.
I'll take it under advisement. How about that?
Okay, you know what? That's better than most. That's better than most people are willing to give me. We are sending Dusty and Arif to London. So they will be covering the Browns game. They will be attending the game and also be doing something afterwards in a pub. We're actually getting things settled down pretty quickly here, nailed down rather, as far as specifics. So we'll be going into that a little bit later, and when Dusty and Arif do the preview show later this week, we will have all of the details for you. So that'll just be in a couple of days. So you can plan your Sunday and really weekend accordingly. Take pictures of them. Throw money at them. Dusty's willing to do many, many things for a couple quids, so it'll be fine.
Yeah, especially if his history has anything to say.
If history has anything to say, yes. Great. Also, if you would like to help us out, since we are going to London, if you would like to help us out, there's a couple different ways you can do that. For immediate help, you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode and donate there. That is the PayPal that goes directly to us right away. Also, you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode. And by going there, it's a sustaining membership, so you can give anywhere between $1 and untold amounts of money per month to help out the show. Again, we really appreciated this. This is really cool that we're going to have the ability to go to the London game and have both of us and have both Arif and Dusty over there to do it. So if we want to do something like this in the future for next season, Patreon is incredibly important to us. So if you have a couple bucks you're willing to throw our way, please do so. We appreciate it. These are the only ads you ever hear on this show. We're not shilling for anything else. We're not trying to get you to buy anything else. All that we ask is that if you hear value in this broadcast, you can just throw us a couple bucks whenever you feel like it, and we appreciate it. So, that said, Benjamin Balser via Patreon, thank you so much for executive producing this week's show, for donating via Patreon. We appreciate the tree fitty. It helps keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay. We may also have a little Instagram fun with Nessie, with the Loch Ness Monster, depending on our availability in London this week. So, great stuff there. Again, thank you, Benjamin. We really do appreciate it. So let's talk the Ravens game now, and can we start off with the broadcast? Because holy crap, that was terrible.
It was an awful broadcast. And it wasn't just the broadcast / announcing team, although I think they did a really poor job. But just the whole production unit for the team just did a horrible job.
It wasn't just the broadcast. Like at one point, I was pining for Mike Goldberg in the booth, but it's these guys are seasoned veterans. These guys do it every week. They were so bad, talking over officials, not having a clue what was going on as far as penalties were concerned. The way that the director had framed it, we were missing shots. I'm convinced we missed an entire play. But like,
yeah, it certainly feels like that. So there's so many problems. It's so difficult to go over. Like, there's the sort of the soft problems that are like not as bad but kind of annoying, and they build on these larger problems that existed. So like the small problems are like, I have no idea why the fans are booing. It's 4th and 8, and it's like, well, obviously they're either booing the bad penalty call in the previous play or the fact that the Vikings ran it on 3rd and like 15.
It was the sea of purple that confused them. They were looking at it like, did they not sell any to any of the other to the opposing team? Like, why is there only purple in this stadium?
Yeah, right. And like they did a poor job explaining the penalties, even when they got to the moment where like there were penalties on the screen to be explained. They did a poor job providing appropriate replays of the game. They cut away from actual plays. We missed the beginning of a couple of plays. There's a whole segment of commercials,
like just ridiculous, and it was bizarre to see. Like, Twitter should not be necessary to watch a football game. Twitter should just be like a little sprinkling. Like as far as like the ice cream cone is concerned, it should be the sprinkles on top. It shouldn't be the friggin' cone. Like, it shouldn't be that needed to understand what's happening. We
shouldn't learn critical game information from Twitter. It should be provided by the broadcast unit. And they didn't do that. They didn't do a very good job. And also, I think the thing that actually bothered me the most from the commentary, there's so many problems with like the production side that the commentary can't control. But the thing that bothered me most about the commentary is they spent so much time talking about stuff that like wasn't the game. It also wasn't like a serious discussion, right? Like, so if Tyreek Hill is doing well in a game and they spend a moment to talk about, his history and, like how awful it is, like that, I think that makes sense, right? Because it's kind of like an important issue and you want to talk about it a little bit. But like, we don't need like 80 shots of Mike Wallace is looking for a helmet and the fact that he has a concussion and that he's out. They kept on talking about stuff that was like so far away from the game, like obscure stats and records that didn't have an impact on the game. And Mike Wallace a lot. And they cut away to a bunch of other games a lot, which if you're not doing all of this other stuff, I'm okay with. You want to update on the rest of the NFL, but compounded with, the fact that they talked over plays and they were just like, I'm talking about this. That's an incompletion anyway. On to my story, and then and now for an update on, the Saints game or whatever. Like I think it really drove. It sucked energy. I should say that it sucked energy out of the game. And while it wasn't an offensively like spectacular game, I think there were a lot of exciting moments that kind of got glossed over because of it.
No, exactly. You don't need that many in-game updates for a game, unless it's like the very end of the year and there's a question as to who's going to end up making the playoffs. And so you have your like 4 scenario games that are going on that you end up cutting to repeatedly during the game. And as a result, you're still paying attention to yours because yours probably matters. So you're actually into it. Meanwhile, there was no reason for that many like cuts about what was happening in every other. It was just sad. And the Mike Wallace thing, especially because like, did they even say that he was out for the game until like halftime?
They might not have actually. And maybe that's why they had this discussion about him looking for his helmet, because by the time they'd cut to him just walking around on the sideline
and like jawing with fans and everything.
Right. He'd already been ruled out.
Yeah.
And they were talking about him as if he was like trying to find a way to get back into the game. So yeah, it was.
And it'd be different if the symptoms that he was showing. Okay, so, the keyboard warrior like doctor thing going on here. he was showing symptoms of a situation that happens after concussion, where you get super upset and angry and confused and don't understand why you're not being allowed to do things after you get a concussion. It was very clear that he probably had a concussion on the field. So meanwhile, he's yelling at coaches and everything. You can say that sentence aloud and be like, well, one of the signs of a concussion is blah. You can say that, as opposed to he's just sitting there arguing with the coaching staff, trying to get his helmet on, trying to get out there and play. Like, well, why? Why is he doing this?
Right.
Your job is to explain the why sometimes.
Yeah, they always got, like, whenever they got to something that was like worth talking about, they would always skirt the part where it's worth talking about. And so now, like, why do we spend so much time looking at this?
It's like two people in a bad relationship driving on a very long drive to some place they didn't necessarily want to be. That's all that commentary was just two people trying to avoid what was actually happening in front of them. Okay, so end of that rant for just a moment. I'm not a big believer in East Coast bias as far as like ranking NFL teams and everything. I don't believe that's necessarily a thing, but wow, did they give too much credit to the Ravens offense and defense this week? That
I think so.
Was obscene.
Well, it's a good thing we had Dylan as a guest on the show, because his pessimism about the Ravens, and particularly their offense, mirrored the Ravens' actual performance in the game.
Exactly. Listening to people talk about the Ravens play and what they were expecting this week. Anybody who had seen the Ravens at all this year knew that A, they were trash, and B, their defense is the only thing that was like keeping them afloat. But if they were going to play against a team that could rush the passer, which we can, stop the run, which we definitely can, and stop them on third down, which we're the best at in the league, it wasn't going to be a football game. And listening to all these people pick the Ravens and talk about how good the Ravens were going to be in this game and how this was a favorable matchup for them, I was like, yeah, all Case Keenum needs to do is not turn the ball over like more than twice, and this is probably going to be ours.
Yeah, like it's like they were thinking about like the 2012 version of some of these players. Like, oh, Joe Flacco, 2012, Mike Wallace, 2012. What great players to have as a way to like drive this offense forward.
Look at this great collection of talent that the 2012 Ravens have.
Right, like, oh, Ben Watson, he's at the prime of his career. He's 28, like, right, like it's like and they were maybe thinking like, the Ravens offensive line, it's typically quite good. They got Bryant McKinney and Marshall Yanda, Matt Burke, All-Pro center.
Matt Burke, who oddly enough was in attendance according to Twitter. Pork never goes bad. This will be fine. What's the worst that could happen? So, anyway, I listening to people talk about the Ravens matchup this week, it bothered me because you knew what was coming, and now that it happened, it's the Ravens. Boy, what's wrong with the Ravens this year? Yeah, you've been asking that since week one. Let's give the Vikings just a little bit of credit here. So let's talk the Vikings, and I guess the first thing that I want to bring up is the Treadwell interception. It was the first play that we had offensively. We grabbed the ball from Mike Wallace, who fumbled after his concussion. Case Keenum goes back to throw. We're gonna try to hit him big, and Treadwell bounces the ball up in the air twice with his hands, and then it gets picked off.
Yeah. So I saw a couple of people say, hey, we shouldn't really count that against Treadwell because that should have been, defensive pass interference. And I agree that it should have been defensive pass interference, but I don't think that should excuse Treadwell entirely. Now, we've got like two plays where I think it's been pretty clear that Treadwell was unfairly hampered by a legal play from defensive backs. But I mean, like, as a receiver, you just kind of have to work with it. Like, actually, a good example is actually from this game. Adam Thielen was, complaining about the way defenders were playing him early in the game. And he jawed to the refs and stuff like that. But then he also started doing the same thing to the defensive players, right? And he was able to get open. He got a couple of catches on what probably in most games is offensive pass interference. And it was a good way to not only call attention to the issue, but kind of respond to the fact that the refs were playing at least that type of issue a little bit lightly. And while, that's something that's a response to something, not every defensive pass interference is going to be called. If you're going to play a team like the 2013 Seahawks or something, stuff like that's going to happen. And it's going to happen even if, we're in an offensive, pass-friendly environment. You need to be able to overcome that. And so I don't want to just give him a pass for not being able to play physically in situations where things aren't like ideal or perfect. I think that he played the ball poorly, and more important than I think, whether or not, he played it well in the airs. I think he played the process before he jumped into the air poorly. He needed to establish better position on the ball and get inside leverage because that's clearly where the ball was going, and he didn't do that. And so he didn't track the ball well enough. He didn't position himself well enough where even in a situation where there's defensive pass interference, he had the ability to neutralize it. So there are, I think, legitimate criticisms of his ability to kind of overcome physical play, even if a lot of that physical play comes in the form of stuff that, should be or is against the rules. So I don't want to say, no, it was perfect, he screwed it up. He didn't, but I don't think he is doing what he is tasked with doing, what he was drafted for, which is kind of overcoming that type of physical adversity in play. So, I mean, that's my thought. And then also, Keenum, not great.
Not particularly great, no. I saw the comment on Twitter immediately after the interception where it said, once again, Treadwell does not get separation. It's like, really?
I mean, yeah.
But it leads to the bigger question of all the handsiness that was happening on the field. Like, it didn't seem like they were calling anything in the way of PI offense or defense.
Yeah, and I don't think it was a particularly well officiated game. I get the Andrew Sandeo penalty. I don't think it was a penalty, but that depends on how you define a defenseless player and whether or not you think. So the first replay, it looks a little bit more like helmet to helmet. The second replay looks a lot to me like shoulder to helmet. And that's only a penalty. Shoulder to helmet's only a penalty in a situation where the ball carrier or the intended receiver is a defenseless player or a player in a defenseless posture.
Right. And
that gets defined in different ways. And I think for the most part, if you're a runner eligible to fumble, you're probably not a defenseless player. There's one subset of a rule that defines a defenseless player where if you're completely wrapped up in forward progress has been stopped, which I don't think is quite true in that case, or is one step from being true, then you can be a defenseless player, and a hit from the head, crown of helmet, or forearm or shoulder or whatever to the head or neck area is a penalty. So you can legislate it either way, but it was kind of, so I get the call, and it sucks that a turnover was taken away. But I think a lot of other cases, I think that the game was not called particularly well. But I think
the Tom Johnson incident as well.
I don't mind that.
You don't mind the tripping, the tripping into hitting his thigh, and that being called for going low.
Right. Yeah. Because and the reason I don't mind that is it absolutely is unfair to Tom Johnson. It's an unfair penalty. It exists as an unfair penalty. But if it exists, you should call it. Even if the player has to do essentially impossible things to avoid it, which, I mean, that sucks. Right. And I just think the penalty is poorly designed or ruled. But there's going to be a ton of borderline situations where if you're not going to call what happened with Tom Johnson as a penalty, there's a lot of borderline situations where you then have to start divining the intent of players. And so in order to avoid the weirdness of that, they have to call those penalties, which, I mean, that sucks. It's nearly impossible for Tom Johnson to avoid it. But the fact that it is in the rule book the way it is reason that it should be called like that. So I don't blame him for it, but I don't mind that it was called that much. Now, if maybe if it was fourth down in a tie game and, that revived the drivers, I might have different feelings. I may be just more generous because the Vikings won in a pretty astounding fashion. But, right now I'm thinking about it. It doesn't bother me that much, and I don't blame Tom Johnson for it.
Well, you certainly can't blame Tom Johnson for it. Tom Johnson couldn't have done a darn thing to stop that.
Right. Yeah. And that's the problem with the existence of that penalty. The issue really is the fact that they have that penalty at all. And then they also have penalties about being able to hit the head or neck area. And so you've got this tiny window in which, especially for a quarterback, you have the ability to hit a quarterback, where in some situations it's legal and in some situations it's not, whatever. Right. And it's weird because a defensive player that gets knocked to the ground sees a quarterback's legs and just can't do anything about it. And that's just that's dumb, I think.
Yeah,
the penalty's existence is my greater issue, not when refs call it. Yeah.
I feel like there's not a lot of situations where you can legislate intent on that, but
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I don't like a lot of instances where you would be asked to legislate intent. So the fact that they don't put that as part of the rule, I get it. And I just don't think it should be a rule.
No,
we can both agree.
Rule,
yeah, right?
It's the Brady rule. Yeah, we can both agree that it probably shouldn't be a rule. I don't necessarily think it should have been called, but I get it, but I still don't think it necessarily should have been. But
yeah,
we can move on and talk about something positive, which was Murray's day. Boy, that was good.
Yeah, and I thought what I really like about Latavius Murray's day is that my kind of scouting report on him thus far has been essentially. And, on this podcast, I've defended his play for the past 2 games. I think he's done fine, and I'm really glad that he kind of paid back that faith by having a 100-yard game and a touchdown. But what's nice about this game that is different from the other games is that I thought he did a better job of kind of creating those yards, because Latavius Murray's kind of his biggest knocks to me were despite his size, he didn't do a great job of breaking tackles and generating that many yards after contact, except in goal line situations, which I guess if you're going to pick one situation, that would be it. And then, so that's one. And then 2, that he doesn't, he can't find ways to generate yardage outside of the design of the play. So if the design of the play fails, he can innovate or create to do new stuff. And I think that he did that in this game. And then he also found ways to generate yards after contact. And he went low too. And so, and that's been an issue throughout his entire career. That was an issue of his coming out of college. And whether or not that's, a result of the Vikings running back coaching from Kennedy Polamalu or whatever, he looked really good in this game. He demonstrated patience. He demonstrated vision. And I thought he did a good job. And there were a lot of situations where I think the interior of the offensive line wasn't giving him a ton of room to work with. And he was still able to kind of get to the line of scrimmage and sometimes more. 2 big runs that were really nice to see.
Was he faster out there? It seemed like he was faster, or is it just that the Ravens were slower? But it seemed like he was bursting through some of those seams.
The Ravens are not a particularly fast team. That might play a role. But remember, at the combine, he ran a 4.37. You just kind of absorb that. It's he was 225 pounds at the combine, ran a 4.37. That's like McKinnon stuff. Oh my gosh. But he never really looked that fast outside of his rookie year in Oakland. So, presumably it slowed down. And I think one of the issues is less his long speed and more his burst. And in this game, it certainly seemed like he had more burst. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's just every week, his ankle is clearing up. Because remember, at the beginning of the season, he said, he still wasn't fully healthy. And I think even 2 games ago, Mike Zimmer mentioned that, he's still kind of dealing a little bit with that ankle. So I think some of it might have to do with his ankle just getting healthier every week, which is nice. But we got to remember, coming into the NFL, he was actually one of the more athletic running backs at his size that we've seen. And maybe we're getting back to that. He certainly doesn't look like a guy who ran a 4.37 yet. But he's definitely looking like a guy that could challenge, 4.5 flat right now, which is good.
Well, next thing we want to talk about is the passing game. And once again, Case Keenum was bailed out on a couple of terrible throws. And on a few others, they were just sailing over people's heads. I would have thought, and if I was on the show for the preview, I would have mentioned this. Boy, I would have thought that this week and next would have been Case Keenum's best work, because he knows that Teddy is breathing down his neck and that the fans are breathing down his neck as far as production. And if he was going to silence them, he had two games here where he could just go out and dominate and have the best performances of his career. And we'll see what happens in London, but I would have thought that he would have performed better against this defense.
Yeah, no, for sure. The whole point or the whole argument, I think, was that you want to ride the hot hand. You don't want to let the team kind of lose, I guess, momentum from Case Keenum's play going forward. And whatnot. In order for that to be true going forward, he has to continue playing really well. And continue, I think, is a strong word, right? Because we've both been confident that while his statistics have looked really good, he hasn't played to the level that his statistics imply, and we kind of saw again the results of that. And so we saw an interception that wasn't 100% his fault. Blame the refs a little bit, blame Treadwell a little bit, but he didn't place the ball well. We saw another one or two plays that should have been intercepted that he got a little lucky on. We saw pretty wild inaccuracy. We saw some good contortion from Adam Thielen and Jarius Wright in order to make Case Keenum look correct. And he was one of the less accurate quarterbacks this week. I think if you take a look at his completion percentage, it's something like 68% or something like that, which is pretty high. But when you consider sort of where the ball was placed, that's pretty low. And then also consider the fact that there were no drops in this game. And if you count drops as completion, 68% ends up being really, really low among quarterbacks. And so even in terms of just how many passes hit the receivers, he was actually below average despite the high completion rate. And anyone who watched the game probably would end up agreeing because of how much receivers had to adjust for the ball. I mean, we could talk about Kyle Rudolph and how he had a so-so game and how a couple of passes should have been caught by him that weren't. But in some of those situations, those passes were really just not on the mark. The same thing with Treadwell. There's this one pass, I think it was on 3rd and 10. Treadwell catches it for 7 or 8 yards. And that puts the Vikings in field goal range. They ended up, kicking it or whatever. And I'm not sure better ball placement could have generated a first down, but it was not good ball placement. Made Treadwell have to work a little bit too hard to get it. And it increased the odds of an incompletion. It certainly decreased the odds of generating any yards after the catch. And we saw that all day. Jarius Wright laid out for a couple of passes. I thought the final throw to Jarius Wright was actually, pretty accurate, even though Jarius Wright had to work even more for it. But for the most part, Wright, did a really good job making Keenum look correct on those decisions. So, yeah, a lot of errant throws, an interception that was partially his fault, not entirely, and one or two more throws that probably should have been interceptions or would have been against, a slightly better defensive core.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's once again give thanks to Adam Thielen's hands and Kyle Rudolph's hands for keeping a couple of those balls caught, so we were able to continue on 3rd down to move the sticks.
Yeah, because to eventually kick a field goal.
To eventually kick the field goal. Yes, it was that was good. So next up is the offensive line, who did a heck of a job today.
Yeah, I thought so, especially I think the tackles. I think Riley Reif did a really great job, both as a pass protector and as a run blocker. Mike Remmers only gave up one hurry the entire game and ended up being a really dominant run blocker, maybe the best run blocker out of all 5 of the offensive linemen. When Rashad Hill and Danny Isidora came in, I thought they did well in pass protection. I think that both of them had a lot of struggles in the running game, which I think is one of the reasons that the running game kind of fell off in the second half. the Vikings running game has also kind of been falling off in the second half for quite some time, ever since Dalvin Cook went out. So, a little bit on them as a result. Berger, whatever. But that Pat Elflein, for the most part, had a decent game among the 4 interior players that played. For Brandon Williams and Michael Pierce to have as good a game as they did, some of the offensive linemen had to have a poor game. But I thought the tackles did really well. My initial review is that Pat Elflein did really well. And so, that's good to see. For the most part, the pass protection was just on point. I think Keenum ended up getting pressured on only a quarter of his dropbacks. The NFL average is somewhere around 30%, and so that was really good to see. So
the sentence I didn't expect to hear during the broadcast that we heard was, "You can't give Case Keenum that much time." When on earth has that been said about a Viking quarterback? When has a Viking quarterback had time to tie his shoes or even have a second thought? That was my favorite part of the whole game. It wasn't the Latavius Murray run in for a touchdown, which was good. That was a great effort by him. Looked good. It wasn't any of the passes. It wasn't even the sack that Tom Johnson got later to make up for that stupid penalty. No. My favorite moment of the entire game was, you can't give Case Keenum that much time.
He'll slice you open like a surgeon. You give him that much time.
Boy, you haven't seen that much time since the Bucs gave him that much time. It was crazy. So offensive line looked good, but there's a couple of potential injuries on the line, right?
Yeah, we're worried about Riley Reif, left tackle, and Jeremiah Searles, left guard. Zimmer ended up saying that both of those injuries were not that serious. I don't know. We've heard that before, right? Like Sam Bradford, not a serious injury. He'll be back any day now. So I don't know, kind of what to the extent is. My feeling is that it's not that bad. Beat writers who were in the locker room indicated that neither of the players who had lower body injuries, I think both of them knees. So, go Vikings. Again, more knee injuries. But it seems like neither of them were walking with a limp, and it was fairly precautionary that they were out. So I'm not that concerned, but just remember, the evidence we do have is not solid evidence. So
no,
yeah, not that concerned.
Much,
high degree of uncertainty in either direction.
Yeah, that much we can be certain. This is not the case. Let's talk about the defense, and we beat up Joe Flacco. Their offensive line looked like they were on roller skates.
Yeah, really, really stellar job from Everson Griffin. Not only did he get 2 sacks, he also ended up with 3 additional hurries just in the pass rushing game.
And he got his offsides of the year, or offsides.
Yeah, and he got his offsides, which is got to tally that up too. And he got that out of the way, like in a that was at the very part of the game.
Yeah, that was at the very end of the game, and it seemed
well timed.
It seemed like all those penalties that they were kept giving to the defense just made the defense mad. Like, it just made them more angry.
Yeah, and some of the penalties, the offending player just kind of made up for it on the very next play.
Right.
Like Tom Johnson, I think, made up for the penalty, with the tackle for loss or something like that. Yeah, really good stuff from the defensive line. We also saw Danielle Hunter. I thought he had a pretty decent, not amazing, but pretty decent game, generating pressure too. And I think kind of the best part about the defense was, the only thing I was kind of worried about, not super worried about, but I was kind of worried about the running game, because Alex Collins has looked pretty good the past 2 games. I'm not that worried about Joe Flacco, but, if they get something going, it could happen in the running game. Buck Allen is the type of running back that the Vikings have historically had trouble with. Your Theo Riddicks, right? People like Danny Woodhead, maybe. Like those smaller, shiftier running backs who have the ability to catch the ball and juke out linebackers. Those people I think the Vikings have had problems with. So I was a little bit concerned about Buck Allen. I was a little bit concerned about Alex Collins. Not an issue. Linval Joseph had 3 stops in this game, according to PFF. Again, a stop is any tackle that constitutes a loss for the offense if they don't stay on schedule, essentially, if they're behind the sticks. And in that case, Linval Joseph continues to lead the league in run stops, which is great. He's also generating pressure up the middle, definitely making his case as the best nose tackle in the league. Once again, Damon Harrison's having a good season. We'll see how Brandon Williams does for the rest of the year. A couple of other nose tackles are doing all right, but I think Linval Joseph continues to play like the hashtag elite nose tackle that Vikings fans kind of know him to be. And so he was kind of the biggest part. And his play, his ability to keep the linebackers clean, enabled Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks to have the day that they had.
Side note, before we go on, I got into a conversation earlier this week about, late last week, about players that were brought on as soon as Mike Zimmer came in. And who was your favorite that's like still around? Is Linval Joseph the best player that we brought in right when Zimmer came in?
Are we like? Does that include players drafted in 2014, or all just free agents too? Like,
let's just go free agents because there were a slew of free agents that we picked up.
It would have to be Linval Joseph because the only comparable player would have to be captain, right? And he's gone.
And he's gone, yeah.
And then there were a couple of other. Tom Johnson actually he came in, I think, as soon as Mike Zimmer came in too. Underrated signing, obviously.
Right.
Really good, especially considering the injury problems. But yeah, Linval Joseph is the most important player I think that they've signed in free agency over the past couple of years.
I was going to say, Linval and Terrence Newman was brought on right after, like either the year after he came or the same year. It might have been the year after, but really feels like the same year, right? Yeah.
But Chris Crocker was signed that year, and I think that was the Bengals defensive back that which is so funny to think about. Like, he's starting all of training camp. He started the first preseason game, then got cut in the first round of cuts. And you're like, what?
Like, I don't understand what's happening here. All right. Well, we'll move on. So the next thing I want to mention is Harrison Smith and Anthony Barr. Boy, did they just have a fantastic game.
Yeah, Anthony Barr ended up having 2 tackles for loss and I think 3 additional stops. Ended up having a sack, which, just dirty, evil, malicious, unnecessary roughness type stuff. Just awful, an awful player.
The worst. How did we not get a flag for touching Flacco when he went down and sacked himself? Like, how dare we?
So Anthony Barr forced a third down sack, forced a punt, got a pass deflection as well. Just a really good game. I think maybe the best defensive player in that game, aside from Linval Joseph. And certainly I think Anthony Barr is continuing to make his case that he is far closer to his 2015 self than his 2016 self. He says, that he's playing the best ball of his life. Hard to disagree.
He was looking like an all-pro out there.
Yeah. That game, he certainly looked like an all-pro. He did miss a tackle, which, that's kind of one of his 2 big knocks. The other one being pass coverage, and he did just fine in coverage. In fact, you take a look at how many yards he gave up per coverage snap in this game. It's one of the lowest we've seen from a linebacker. That's not 0. It was like a 2-yard pass, and it's the only pass that he gave up in coverage. Really good stuff. And what's really important is that he shut down a ton of screens. We talk a lot about how the Lions are a screen-heavy team. We don't really talk enough about, and it makes sense that they're in the AFC, so why would we talk about them? But we don't talk enough about how the Ravens have suddenly become a screen-heavy team. I know Dylan mentioned it when we brought him on to the show, but we really saw that a lot in this game, especially against the Vikings, because the way that they set up their defense is that they've got linebackers threatening at the line of scrimmage to rush the passer, which is fine. It creates a lot of coverage confusion. It opens up a lot of stuff in terms of pressure. The easiest way to deal with that is either a slant, up the middle to deal with the linebacker zone, or a pass to the flat where you've got defenders essentially vacated. And so it becomes the linebacker's job to shut down either the pass up the middle or the pass to the flat. And both Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks, but more Anthony Barr, have the athleticism to be able to jump from like the opposite side A gap or B gap all the way to shut down a screen. And he just did a phenomenal job shutting down the really screen-heavy game we saw for the Ravens today, which is not to say, Eric Kendricks didn't also ball out. He had a really great game, led the team in tackles, had 4 tackles for loss, and I think another stop besides. But, it wasn't as good. He gave up a lot more in coverage, which none of it seemed, as like problematic. There was no single snap in coverage where you're like, he screwed up. But, he wasn't as stellar in coverage as Anthony Barr. He did miss, 1 or 2 tackles. Really good game from him, just not as quite up to Anthony Barr standards. So, between the two, I'd give it to Barr. And then out of all the defensive backs, I think Harrison Smith had probably the best game. He and Xavier Rhodes made 1 mistake, essentially each. And the mistake that Harrison Smith made wasn't a missed tackle. He got off his block late. Again, on one of the other Ravens screens. But otherwise, he was great. He had a couple of tackles in the backfield, tackle for loss, I think, a couple of run stops. And what's interesting is you take a look at Harrison Smith's statistics for the season. Among safeties, he leads the league in adjusted yards given up per snap in coverage. He leads the league in pressure rate for blitzing safeties. He is 3rd in the league in tackling efficiency, so he doesn't miss tackles. The only area where he's not the number 1 or number 3 safety in the NFL is stopping the run, and that's only in terms of his run stop percentage. And there he's like 18th of like 70 safeties, so it's not like he's bad. He's very good at it. But it just Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, Danielle Hunter, Everson Griffin, they're soaking up all those tackles, for him to get it. And in this game, we saw a couple of more of those run stops, and so he's kind of inching even closer to the top of that statistic too.
On another team, he might have a better number because they don't have everyone plugging the gap like we do.
Exactly, right. If you've got a team with a weaker defensive line or weaker linebackers, Harrison Smith would have to do more in terms of pursuit and run defense. What's really nice is that this enables him to do all this other stuff. And we saw Anderson Dejo play. I thought, he made, that penalty is let's say we'll count it as a mistake for now. Other than that, I thought he played well. He certainly set the tone for the defense, hit harder in this game than Harrison Smith did. Hard to do. And then Xavier Rhodes, he ended up getting dusted by Michael Campanaro early in the game on a pick play. So, and we've seen those pick plays from the Ravens before, so it shouldn't come as a surprise. He should have done a better job. For the rest of the game, he kind of locked it down. The only defensive back who didn't have a stellar game was Trey Waynes, and I'm kind of ignoring the garbage time whatever, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think throughout the game, he benefited from how inaccurate Joe Flacco was more than he did a good job covering his receiver. Especially, on in breaking routes, he had some issues staying with his receiver. There were a couple of instances where he was targeted where the receiver was wide open, and it was inaccurate. So it was incomplete, and so he kind of benefited from it. Despite all of those inaccuracies, if you take a look at, let me pull it up. I've got this statistic up here. You take a look at, how many yards given up per snapping coverage. Right now Waynes is 35th of 41 for cornerbacks this week. It's an unusually good week for cornerbacks, so it's not as bad as it sounds. But some people, like I mentioned, so someone asked me, hey, put that garbage time touchdown aside. Do you think, he had a good game? And I was like, well, no, I don't think he had a bad game. And I want to make that clear. I don't think he had a bad game. I don't think he had a good game. Someone's like, well, what do you mean? He didn't have a good game. Joe Flacco only had like 150 passing yards. How could he have had a bad game? And it's like, well, give Flacco credit for being bad too, right?
let's not give it all to Trey Waynes. Flacco was stunk on ice out there.
Yeah, he was garbage, right? Waynes gave up 50 of those yards, and again, a lot of those were in garbage time. Not a big deal. But he was targeted a lot for a reason, and it was because he was open a little bit more often. And it sounds like I'm piling on Waynes, especially because I didn't like the pick, and I get it. He had a fine game. It was fine. It was okay. I don't want to take too much away from him in that game. He certainly looked a lot better than he has in previous games, even this season. So I don't want to say he had a bad game, but in a game with a bunch of stellar defensive backs against a bad quarterback, he kind of stuck out, and that's it.
Yeah, let's talk about Trey Waynes then for just a moment. had a decent game for at least 3 quarters. Gave up the garbage time touchdown, which seems to be a Zimmer staple at the end of games. But overall, he certainly wasn't bad. It didn't look like he was used all that much in the rush defense, which tends to be his.
Kind of one of the few games where we didn't see him kind of pop out in run defense. I think some of that has to do with the Ravens. When they ran the ball, they didn't run it to the outside that often, so there were fewer opportunities. But he didn't stick out in run defense as much, and so we were able to focus a little bit more on coverage, which is apparently not a strength.
which is just a darn shame for somebody who's a corner to just not be great at. And you know what I kept saying, and I didn't tweet it. I really should have, because I would have gotten credit for it. But during that last play, or during that last drive, I just kept thinking to myself, Trey Waynes is going to get a game-ending pick here. Trey Waynes is going to get the pick. It's the way it's going to happen. Trey Waynes is totally going to get the game-ending interception.
No, he didn't play nearly bad enough for him to get the redemptive game-winning interception.
Is that what he has to do? Is that what we have to reach before he can?
Every game where he's gotten a half-ending, or I think any interception actually. I think every game where he's gotten an interception, the rest of his game was really bad.
There might be something to that. That's just too bad. I guess the last thing I want to mention about the game is what was with the Ravens and their just lack of energy or drive on that final drive.
I have no idea.
That was a beautiful snapshot of the entire Ravens season right there. There was, I joke, I've said the phrase, they lack bad attitude, no hustle for a few years now, but this was a situation of bad attitude, no hustle. You had an opportunity. You were down 2 scores. You could have done something, as opposed to that weird pass. You get the touchdown, and then there's, that's the end of the game. All you were trying to do at that point was break your streak of not scoring a touchdown.
Right. And if you've only watched the NFL for maybe 1.5 years, 2 years, you'd be like, well, I mean, they didn't have much of a chance. It doesn't matter. But that's not really the case. We've seen a ton of games where that kind of score differential with 3.5 minutes left to go, because I think they had the ball 3.5 minutes left. Even 2.5 minutes can turn into something super exciting and close, and could even be a win, or at least go to overtime. And of course we've seen it with Tom Brady and apparently Matthew Stafford. But we've also seen it with Joe Flacco in the Ravens against the Vikings. We saw the most wild end of game scenario where Cordero Patterson has a 67-yard touchdown run, and then Jacoby Jones returns it for anything can really happen. And you're just wasting all this time. You're not, it was just weird.
In a world where the ending that happened on Thursday happened, anything is possible.
Right? Yeah. And, the Ravens, they were lazy enough for me to lose the under. Just, come on, at least try. I would have been a little less upset about losing the under if they had tried. And they didn't even try. Then they hit the over.
And since it affected Arif financially, now we really are upset about it.
Yeah, now I'm really pissed.
There's just no hurry, nothing. Just even the timeout usage was questionable at best.
Yeah, right.
It's I don't understand what is happening right now on this field. All I know is you're marching and you have a chance to pick up a garbage time touchdown, which I just assume you're not even going to onside kick if you get it and there's some time left. You're just going to kick it out and just, Yeah, well, we were kind of putting our hopes on, a kick return fumble, which Marcus Sherrills has never done. But, maybe. That clearly means he's due. That's all that is.
Let's touchdown, kick it off.
Let's talk about the Vikings kicking game for just a moment, because apparently we have to do that again. I have an idea. So I have an idea on how to make Kai Forbath make these extra points.
Well, let's hear it.
This is brilliant. You will not hear this analysis on any other Vikings podcast.
I think I already saw it on Twitter, but go.
Why do you have to just take the wind out of my sails? Can we?
That's who I am. That's who we are.
Oh, that is who we are. You're right.
Let me see if I can guess it.
Okay.
Is it that the Vikings need to commit penalties on the extra point attempts, so they have to kick it from further back?
As many as possible. I'm talking major face masks here. Like, just go to town. Kai Forbath will pay your fine, probably. Just bring it back to the 40, 45-ish. He will be much more accurate and it'll be fine.
You know what's great about this Forbath game, though? In our league, in this game, he scored only -1 points.
Yeah. That was impressive. He still ended up with a negative day, but if you were to own him, which none of us are dumb enough to do, you would only be down -1 point.
It's incredible. He has -75 points from extra points this season, I think. And he still is only -2 for the season. Like, he's really close to that line where he doesn't detract too much from your team.
Yeah, he's almost a decent. He's almost a decent play in that he's like trying to even himself out.
Yeah,
that boy needs some serious meds. Like, it's just all over the place.
It's so weird that it only happens on extra points, man. It's
so very weird. Anything else you would like to talk about as far as the game?
Well, I think the Viking special teams, extra point aside, the Viking special teams were really phenomenal. I want to just kind of mention that. Ryan Quigley, I thought, had a really good day. I thought the kickoff coverage unit had a great day. I think Marcus Sherrills was kind of astounding. I think if I were going to rank the offensive contributions from the game, it would be 1, Marcus Sherrills, 2, Latavius Murray, 3, Jarius Wright. Maybe throw Mike Remmers in there at 3 instead of Jarius. Who knows? But Marcus Sherrills was clearly the most impactful offensive player as a punt returner. And then he also was really good in punt coverage, really good in kickoff coverage. And we saw good kickoff coverage from Jaron Kursk. We saw it from Cantrell Brothers. We saw really good special teams play all around. That field position difference was a big part of the reason that the Vikings, I think, were as dominant as they were, because the Ravens kept on having to start from back in their own territory. The Vikings kept on having an advantage of being able to start from like their own 40 or something like that. So really good stuff, really worth mentioning. Go Quigley, go Forbath, I guess. Forbath had a really good game, but the league has so skewed my perceptions of like what makes a good kicker. But Marcus Sherrills had a great game, and the coverage units both had a really good game. So I just wanted to bring that up. Maybe more impactful than anyone on offense. So maybe normally special teams has like an 18%. That's like the math, an 18% impact on the outcome of games, and the offense is something like 40% more, a little bit more than defense. But in this case, I think the special teams were much more important than the offense. Defense was good too. I don't know if I said that.
Defense might have been okay. Might have been. Well, this wasn't exactly the prettiest game, and we did come away with the win. The Packers lost. The Bears are still awful and back to being completely irrelevant. And the Lions had their bye this week. So we are sitting alone on top of the NFC North. And we are in great position to be the number 2 team in the NFC right now. Why does it feel like we're not... I want to say that we're not good. That's not the sentence I want to be saying, but that's...
Well, because, the team... No one thinks that the Vikings are bad, but I don't think anyone believes the Vikings are, the number 2 team in the NFC, which kind of implies something like the number 4 or 5 team in the NFL. It doesn't feel like that at all.
That defense, I would say yes. That's probably the number 2 defense in the NFC. That belongs to the number 2 team in the NFC. But it just something just seems off. Like, it just doesn't. There's a smell test involved. It just doesn't seem like we're not overrated, because that's certainly not the case. But
I don't think we'll see what happens with the power rankings coming out this week.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone in the power rankings think of the Vikings as a top 5 team, and that makes sense and is fine. I don't think anyone's upset about that. So it's not overrated, but I think overrepresented by the win-loss column. Maybe
better,
is a better way to put it.
Not as good as our record would indicate. I feel like
Right.
is what I'm trying to say here. I mean,
Right.
we don't have a Carson Wentz on our team, so obviously we're not the number one team in the league. But
Jesus.
it's we're not.
there.
Is that oh. That's gonna make that B-roll I still need to make of just Carson Wentz comments on the show. Yeah, I would argue we're not playing up to the potential that we have, or that our record is far better than we are playing. But
Yeah, I think both of those things are true. And I think the reason that we know that to be the case is Case, actually. Sam Bradford comes back, Teddy Bridgewater comes back. It really feels like the team is finally like slotted into a position where it can be that good. Because I think the defense is really good, but no one is confusing them for the 2013 Broncos, right? Or I guess the 2015 Broncos even, because a team like the 2015 Broncos, where the defense is the number one in the NFL, one of the better defenses we've seen over the past decade, can carry a quarterback that poor, and everyone kind of just accepts it, like, oh yeah, that's the number one or two team in the NFL, and they don't got a good quarterback, and that just happens sometimes. The defense is good. It does not feel like it is the Broncos 2015 good, and that's okay. I don't think anyone's upset about it, and there's only one or two holes in the defense that I'm really concerned about. But yeah, it doesn't feel like you're there, and then it also feels like we know that the team is more untapped potential. If the defense plays like this every week, great. They're not going to play the Ravens every week, so it's probably not likely. But if the defense plays like this every week, great. But once you get Stephon Diggs comes back, and you get Teddy or Sam in there, then yeah, it really feels like the team is closer to fulfilling its potential. So I think it's those two things. I think it's one, the defense is not quite record breaking. Two, some of it just has to do with how good we know it can be, and it's not.
Yeah, we get accused of being negative on this show, so apologies, but it really did feel like that was the case. This wasn't a great football victory. We probably should not have been nearly as close as it was, but we got the win. We are on top of the NFC North, and we get to go to London and feast on that Browns team. We don't even know who their starter is going to be. That's how good the Browns team is right now.
Right. So this week they benched Kaiser for, I think, Cody Kessler. I want to say Cody Kessler.
You could say that name, and I don't even know if that's a player in the league.
He was once described, much like Teddy Bridgewater, as a young Joe Montana.
The only time that Teddy Bridgewater has ever been referred to as a young Joe Montana happened this week, and I think it was Jarius Wright who was calling him that.
Yeah. Well, no, so Kyle Rudolph called him Joe Montana, and then Jarius Wright was like Black Joe Montana. So
okay.
Yeah.
That is different, I suppose.
Right. Rudolph doesn't see race, so that's the difference.
He's the Stephen Colbert of targets.
Yeah, right, exactly. But yeah, so they benched Deshaun Kaiser for Cody Kessler and or Kevin Hogan, a guy. They benched him for the other quarterback that they benched him for. And then after the game, Hugh Jackson says, so before the game, Hugh Jackson's like, we're not going to bench, Kaiser
for going out and drinking
high water, and then immediately benches him. After the game, he says, they might rotate through the quarterbacks. So, maybe they'll do what the Vikings have been doing with running backs and play the hot hand. Who knows?
Who knows? Bill Simmons had a theory a few years ago that what if you could have three quarterbacks out and just play them in different scenarios. Like you have a quarterback who's better in the red zone. You have a quarterback who's better better in clutch situations, or you have a quarterback who's good at starting the game but is terrible at finishing it, terrible at being playing in the second half. So maybe they're just trying to adopt that. The Browns are really big into their front office until they're all canned and shot into space in a cannon. They're
analytics.
Yeah, they're all analytics based. So Why not just take this opportunity, since you are clearly on borrowed time right now, and just do the crazy setup of having the 3-headed hydra of a QB.
Okay, so I've got a couple of comments on this. The first is that what you described sounds like, in order, Tim Tebow, and Aaron Rodgers. Good in the red zone, probably Tim Tebow. Good in clutch situations, definitely Tim Tebow. Much better in the first half than the second half, definitely Aaron Rodgers, who, by the way, has a 1-35 record against teams with a winning record when trailing in the fourth quarter. Just want to get that out there. Aaron Rodgers, not a comeback kid, despite some of the Hail Marys you saw over the past 3 seasons. So Aaron Rodgers lights it up in the first half, right? Probably even the third quarter. He's Aaron Rodgers. Third quarter, fine. Fourth quarter comes. Holy crap. Get Tim Tebow, quarterback / fullback / tight end / thing
/ outfielder. Is that what he's doing?
Right. / terrible on base percentage, decent slugging percentage. Get him out there.
No one disputes this.
Right. So, yeah, the question is, why haven't the Packers tried to lure Tebow away from the Mets?
That's where all this led to. That's the natural progression of this conversation. We're giving Ted Thompson options here.
I really want that to be the second title for this episode.
Giving Ted Thompson options. We're trying to lure.
Why haven't the Packers lured Tebow away from the Mets?
Well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that after the show.
Okay, so my second comment is I actually saw we have him on the show a couple of times. I really like him. NFL Draft Scout on Twitter, Matt Miller. He ended up tweeting out. I didn't see what the play was, so maybe he's right. But he ended up tweeting out something like, "The Browns got too cute. Just play real football." Again, I didn't see the play. But my first instinct is the Browns have not been good at playing real football. They should get as cute as shit.
As cute as possible, as gimmickly,
they should be
as
like
gimmicky
baby
as possible.
Pokemon cute. Do this weird Bill Simmons whack-a-mole shit. Who cares, right?
Your season is trash. Your division is not going to let you rise up. Your season is likely over. Let's get weird with it.
Yeah. So sorry, Matt Miller. Definitely disagree with you. They should do just the cutest shit.
The absolute cutest.
Yeah, just kawaii. Just come on.
Let's go to the mailbag. Hunter Magnus asks, is Anthony Barr the best 4-3 OLB in the league right now?
Probably not, but he's in the conversation.
That's better than most. Kyle Slabby asks, are we going to ever get rid of our 7th receiver?
I have no idea. I really thought, because the only example I've seen of a team carrying a 7th receiver was North Turner's Chargers a while ago, and after I think a week and a half, they cut the 7th receiver. So yeah, I guess I saw the Browns do it once, but they also cut their 7th receiver. Also, don't know if the Browns are a model for success. But yeah, I thought by now, surely when Michael Floyd came back, you'd get rid of. I mean, here's what's so absurd about the 7th receiver thing. Rodney Adams was active. They decided they did not want Stacey Coley or Jerick McKinnon returning kicks, so they went to Marcus Sherrills. Literally the only thing Adams does is return kicks. Cut him already. What are you doing? And I get that he was active because, both Michael Floyd and Stephon Diggs were injured and you want receiver depth in case something like that happens. But if he's not even returning, come on. You had enough receivers that if another one goes down, let's say Adam Thielen, you've got, Stacey Coley, you've got Jarius Wright, and then you've got Laquan Treadwell. You've got at least 3 receivers, which is how many most teams have in case one of their top receivers goes down. And then you still have Kyle Rudolph. You still got Jerick McKinnon. You still got pass catchers. Latavius Murray can catch the ball. It's not any different from any other injury situation. I did hear that Rodney Adams, I think this was on KFan, that Rodney Adams was actually the reason that Mackenzie Alexander was inactive for the game. Not because Mackenzie Alexander's injury was so, bad that they didn't want him to play, but they were more happy with their defensive back depth than they were with their receiver depth. So I get it, but like, it's weird. They like 2 weeks ago is when that should have happened. It didn't happen. So
yeah,
I guess 7 receivers for life.
That actually should be a tattoo. If you get that tattoo, we will answer whatever question you ask us.
Life has to be spelled with a Y or it doesn't count.
Agreed. Next question is from Jacob Cost, who asks, would you rather have Brad Childress as your offensive coordinator or Leslie Frazier as your defensive coordinator?
Jesus.
Woof.
Oh, my God. That's a good question. I'm going to go with Leslie Frazier because I think his bigger problems were as a head coach, although I guess true Brad Childress. But Leslie Frazier didn't call the defense when he was a head coach.
He did not.
That was Fred Puggich or I think another guy. They went through him. But can I forget the other guy's name now? But Brad Childress did call plays when he was the head coach. So we know definitively what that's like, which is weird because he didn't call plays in Philadelphia. Anyway, but Leslie Frazier was like not great as a defensive coordinator, but he actually wasn't that bad when he was the defensive coordinator. Yeah, he runs an outdated system, but I would imagine by now, he has adapted because he has been involved in other defenses over the past couple of years. I think he's with the Bills now, and they don't run a cover 2.
No.
So, yeah. I guess Frazier.
Kyle, our friend Kyle on Twitter asks, Teddy is at least active in London, yeah?
No. Like, I mean, I would prefer it. But, like, there's nobody that you want to cut from the roster, and you've got, like, the 3 weeks or I guess now 2 weeks of lead time.
Yeah.
2 weeks starting Wednesday of lead time before you're required to make a decision on Teddy Bridgewater. And, if they don't, he reverts to injured reserve, which is probably not going to happen. So, whatever. It's the Browns. Okay, so here's the thing about the Browns. They do not have wide receivers. They do not have quarterbacks. They don't have Joe Thomas anymore, which means they're really hurting on the offensive line.
They interrupted the game to tell us that Joe Thomas wasn't going to be playing for the rest of his game.
Which I think is pretty, like, that's one of the few game interruptions I was okay with. Like, holy crap. Like, was it 10,300 consecutive snaps?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Which I think at this point we can just be like, yeah, we'll just assume that's the NFL record. Like, sorry, Jim Marshall. I assume that that's the NFL record now. But yeah. So they don't have Joe Thomas, maybe. They don't have defensive backs. So no safeties, no cornerbacks. They kind of don't have linebackers. I do like Jamie Collins. But they do have Myles Garrett. The one thing that they really have is a guy who can hurt Teddy. So, you're probably going to win the game.
Yeah.
Don't worry about throwing Teddy in London. I'm going to be at the game. I would love to see it. It would be dope as hell. But I think the risk calculus is let's wait until the bye week.
Probably. Benjamin on Twitter asks, Vikings have built a consistent running game this season. Did we overvalue Cook's pre-injury contributions and undervalue the O-line play?
I'm going to disagree with the premise of the question. The running game is not consistent. It is relatively efficient, but there's a difference between the two. The Vikings running game over the past 3 weeks has relied on explosive plays, but it very often gets behind the chains. And one good way we can measure this is something called success rate. And so it's kind of, I talked about stop rate or stops earlier in this podcast. Success rate just measures how often running backs get enough yardage required to keep the offense on schedule. On first down, that's 40% of the required yardage to convert. On second down, it's 60%. On third and fourth down, it's 100%. Pretty intuitive. So on second and 10, you need at least 6 yards. On second and 5, you need 3, right? And take a look at the success rate of the Vikings running backs over the past 3 games. It's 30%, which that without context doesn't tell you much, but it's among the lowest in the league. Here's a good one. Dalvin Cook was first or second in the league, depending on, kind of where your cutoff is, with 60%. His success rate was basically the inverse. of the McKinnon-Murray success rate. And in this game, it might be a little bit different, but I suspect it's not because of basically the second half was not that good of a running game. And McKinnon's success rate kind of jumped up a little bit over the past 2 weeks at 40%, but it's still, he was a little bit below league average. So it is not a consistent running game. It is an explosive one, a volatile one, a relatively efficient one given that volatility. But Dalvin Cook made it consistent. He kept the offense on schedule. It meant that third down was 3rd and 3 instead of 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 13. And so I don't think that we're undervaluing the offensive lineman, overvaluing the contribution that Dalvin Cook played. So it's nice to see Murray and McKinnon kind of overcome some of the blocking issues that they've had. You take a look at how many yards after contact or how many missed tackles that they forced. It so happens that, Cook, forced a ton of missed tackles in the first 4 games, and either Murray or McKinnon did a decent job forcing missed tackles in the final 3 weeks, including this week, so far this season, but not in the first, 4 weeks. So I don't think so. I think the offensive line is still kind of like an open question in terms of run blocking. Really liked what I saw from Rivers. Really liked what I saw from Reef. Probably one of the better games Elflin has played recently in terms of run blocking. Needed to see more from the left and right guards.
Kenneth Allen on Twitter asks, what was the biggest factor today in the win? It seems like the running backs and linebackers. Hardly heard anything about the cornerbacks. Were they shut down today?
I would say the biggest factor was the special teams unit, which we didn't talk enough about, but it's pretty big. But I mean, you want to give Kai Forbath credit for 51-yard kick. He's not supposed to make them. That's great. But yeah, if we wanted to kind of divorce special teams play from scrimmage play, which is a totally reasonable thing, I think, to ask, I would say the linebackers separated them. I don't think Xavier Rhodes, he had a pretty good game. Harrison Smith had a really good game. Anderson Deo had a better game than we're used to seeing from him over the past 4 years. Great. Trey Waynes, again, I don't think he had an amazing game, but he was fine. So it's not like the cornerbacks got roasted or anything like that. But I think the linebackers played the biggest role because the exact reason that, that success rate matters. The linebackers stopped the run well enough to keep the Ravens kind of off schedule. And it created these third down situations that the Vikings are well known for stopping. Why are they so good on third down? The Vikings are very good at forcing third and long. How are they good at forcing third and long? By forcing failures in the running game. So I think the linebackers played the biggest role.
Very good. Future old person on Twitter asks, who would you rather have as your head coach? I like that. I like that handle too.
That's good.
Who would you rather have as your head coach? Sean Payton or Mike McCarthy?
Okay, so I saw this question roll in, and I was wrestling with it. I was like, man, this sucks. I hate this question. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, on a personal, I was on a personal side, man, I wouldn't want. I probably would not be able to look at Sean Payton on the sidelines without wanting to pelt him with a battery.
Right.
But
I would go with Mike McCarthy, and here's why. He has evolved as a head coach. He used to have too much control over the offense. He's kind of let that go. Plus, for some reason, they make magic out of all of these second round receivers.
How much of that is on the head coach situation, though?
Well, I think a lot, because I don't how good can you say a GM is for finding talent in the second round at receiver, but not being able to find talent friggin' anywhere on the defense. It'd just be weird that they're only good at evaluating one position. I guess 2 if you count quarterback. I don't know.
Sean Payton, in that year that that he was suspended, it was very clear that he was a big reason as to why the Saints were any good ever. So it could be argued that Sean Payton means more to the Saints than Mike McCarthy means to Green Bay.
Oh, this is so tough. But Sean Payton actively neglects the defense. He's you know what we need? Another linebacker? No, another running back. What?
You do.
I think Mike McCarthy is just well, I guess Dom Capers will handle that, but that's not terrible. I don't like Dom Capers. I don't think he's a very good defensive coordinator.
No.
But I just feel like if Mike McCarthy had all of his druthers, he wouldn't necessarily choose Dom campers, and he would be more active on defense. I don't know. That's just a feeling.
Maybe.
I'm open to disagreement. Like I totally, if you're like, no, it should be Sean Payton. Remember the year that he was suspended. Fair, but
Yeah. Tommy Gunn asks, wildly and irresponsible prognostications on the NFC playoff picture for the next 3 weeks. Do you have the Vikings on top?
Yeah, why not?
Sure.
It's irresponsible and conceivable.
And
let's do it.
Both, yeah. It's entirely possible that Carson Wentz falls off a cliff.
Yeah, weird. I don't know if anyone would see that coming, though.
Certainly. If they did, they wouldn't have years worth of tweets and podcasts to point to as to, all of their views on that.
Well, I can't. He's just such a likable guy. I can't see anyone unloading on him like that.
The person at the Vikings game that tweeted at us and said there was a guy in a Wentz outfit, also fully decked out in Vikings gear, cheering as hard as they can for the Vikings. And he's like, "You found the anti-Arif."
No. I thought it was a woman cheering actively against the Vikings.
Was that?
Which makes it even better.
I'd have to check on that. I don't know about that.
That's how I read it. It was like someone in a Wentz jersey was cheering against the Vikings at the Vikings game for like no particular reason. Like, yeah, dope. That's the anti-me. Let's fight.
You must die. I alone am best. Final question. Don from Ohio. Better donut, glazed or chocolate glazed?
I love chocolate. Gonna go with glazed. Gonna go with regular glazed. Glazed is just, it's a simple perfection.
And you're gonna add the chocolate on that?
No. Just a regular glazed. I love chocolate, but I'm sticking with the regular glazed.
I didn't hear the but on that. Yeah, I've got something for just a regular glaze, like just a honey dip, just perfectly, just ugh. That is my favorite kind of donut. And I don't really dig on sweets all that much, but a good donut like that is just really hard to beat.
Right, like I used to be into custard filled, which I still love a lot, or like complicated donuts, and I still love going to Glamdall and getting their like super weird donuts. They've got a donut called the Showgirl, which is like this maple frosting with a bacon on top of it. Really good donut. But sometimes I think as the years, maybe I'm getting old, but as the years have gone on, I just really love simple glazed donuts.
We're all getting old.
I'm old.
We're all just becoming shells of ourselves, and it's going to be tragic at the end. But one thing that will not be tragic is the meetup that we are working on putting together for the London game. This will likely happen at the Barrow Boy and Banker in London. We are still working on times and everything, so hopefully by the time the next episode comes out, we will have some more information on that. Next episode, I believe, is going to be taped on either Wednesday or Thursday, depending on Dusty's flight. I can't remember which day he's going to be sending off, but
I'm pretty sure we'll be able to record on Wednesday.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. So that will likely be announced formally. We will also be putting something out on Facebook. If you're not following us on Facebook, why not? Go ahead and find Norse Code Podcast. We are on there. You can also expect to hear about that on Twitter. So we will be posting lots of stuff. Arif is a must follow if you're not following him already, he's a must follow for this because he's going to have all sorts of lovely information and things about London. I just imagine you and Dusty doing touristy things, and Dusty getting put in jail for trying to punch out the London Tower guards.
Beefeaters.
Yes.
Punching all the beefeaters.
I used to drink gin an awful lot. You'd think I would have remembered the term beefeater. Just a damn shame. So that's the plan right now. We will likely have something there. We will be doing a live taping there with Eric from the Daily Norseman that everyone is looking forward to, especially Eric. I get the feeling Eric doesn't get out much with the kid situation.
With the kid, yeah.
Like, and believe me, I get that. Like I just assume that'll be that he's just like dying to get out and do that. So that'll be really cool.
I found that tweet. no joke, a lady in front of me is wearing a Wentz shirt and actively cheering against Minnesota. So
that's what it was.
The absolute anti-me.
It's just like, the Ravens are close to Philadelphia. It'll be fine.
That's such a weird thing to carry into a Vikings. Like, I don't show up to Vikings game or to Philadelphia Eagles games in my like Jim Kleinsasser jersey or whatever and cheer for Wentz to fail.
They have signs on the doors that say that you are not allowed to come in. Like, they have your picture. Security has your picture. You're not allowed
Smart
to come in. Yeah, exactly. Just like during training camp next year, I just assume that all over Egan, they will say this man is not allowed to mention the word athletic to any of our tight ends.
Also smart of them.
Also very smart of them. Anything to plug before we wrap up?
Hopefully I'll get this piece done by the time we leave for London, but I've got a couple of pieces planned that I don't want to like reveal yet. I'm just so happy about them. I don't want to be like, oh yeah, I'm working on, this thing or this thing. So just keep your eyes peeled. Zonecoverage.com is where those pieces are going to be. And you can follow me at Arif NFL. Some of the most excited pitches I've made for a piece since the column that's still stickied on my Twitter feed, Stick to Sports. I like writing that. These pieces I may like writing more.
Ooh.
We'll see.
How awesome sounding and cryptic. Which is all you're really going for at this point.
Yeah.
Sweet. That is going to be it for the show. So later this week, probably on Wednesday, we will be posting our Browns preview show. Arif and Dusty will be in London to go to the game, to visit with fans, to shower bumper stickers into the crowd. Not a guarantee. I do not know if Dusty's going to be doing this. I just assume. So we've got plenty of good stuff coming throughout the week. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode a day early of Norse Code. And for Arif, for Dusty, my name is James. Thank you so much for listening. And demand excellence. Demand Norse Code. And we will see you later this week.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pogachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, norsecodepodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. And on behalf of the entire Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.